Hello, this is Jen from the Fuzzy Duckling. I'm back with you working on our third project in our If Fishes Were Wishes theme. And today we are going to do a watercolor whimsical rainbow trout. Whimsical because this is, well, a little bit like cartoon or cutesy, not like an actual reality fish, but I think whimsical drawings and paintings are super cute. So we're going to do that today. All right, first off, there's a few things you're going to need. Let's lay this aside. You will need your watercolor paper. And while we're looking at watercolor paper, take a look at your piece, and you're going to find one side of that paper is a little, well, it has a texture on it. You can almost feel it, and you can definitely see it. Turn it over, and this side is smoother. The side that you want to paint on is actually this side that's a little more textury. It has some tooth to it to help hold your paint on. So that's something you'll want to notice when you start painting. Check which side you're painting on. Now you need to take this piece of paper and cut it in half. And you'll have pieces like this. In fact, I cut in half more than one piece. Have several on hand. Now last time we did a watercolor painting, we cut it in fourths. And it's nice to have several of those on hand too, just to quickly make a painting. This time we're going with half sheets. So cut these in half whatever method you like. Get your ruler and use scissors, or if you're a scrapbooker, you might have one of those really neat cutter things. However you want to cut it in half, just choose some pieces and cut these in half. And of course you'll need your paint. And whatever paint you happen to have, that's the paint you need to use. Now, some of you may have some really nice sets of watercolor, and please use those. Those are so nice. But if not, and you're using the set you bought for your kids for school, or you do go to school and you had to have sets of these, you might have 20 of these sets. I don't know. These kind of seem to multiply, don't they? This is fine for this painting too. I know these paints, they're inexpensive, and they don't do everything your expensive paints do, but we'll do everything we need to do with the picture we're doing today. You'll need your pencil, your eraser, pencil, eraser. You can even use one of these mechanical pencils, and a liner pen, waterproof. And you will actually need a white colored pencil. Let's see. That's about it, isn't it? Oh, one more thing you might like to download. Earlier on our last project, when we learned how to draw a rainbow trout, we had a PDF you could download. It gave all the steps on how to draw your trout. And although this trout, here's one of the finished pictures, looks very different because it's a lot more realistic than our whimsical trout, we actually draw very much the same way. So if you want to download this to keep on hand, the steps are going to be very close to the steps you used to draw this rainbow trout. So you might want to take some time and download this. Perhaps you already downloaded it last project and have it on hand. Okay. Now, I would suggest that you take just a plain old piece of sketch paper or copy paper, fold it in half, and practice drawing your fish on this. Don't practice on your expensive, good watercolor paper. This is so much cheaper, and you won't mind if you have to try a dozen times before you get it the way you like it. But it's always a shame to mess up your watercolor paper. And the more you have to erase on this and draw, and the more it's going to affect your final project. So I would suggest that while we're learning how to draw this little guy, just use some copy paper. Now, I did say fold it in half because when you get it the way you like it, it will be just the right size to fit on here. And if you want, You can either use a light box or carbon paper then and trace your picture that you liked on the cheap paper off onto your watercolor paper. I'll admit, I do that all the time. I draw it on sheet paper, I get my light box, and then I draw it onto my watercolor paper. That means I do less line work, less erasing. There's less things that's going to happen to this piece of paper that will show up later and things I don't like. So, I think we should get to drawing. Now, I'm going to run you through these steps, and I'll use this just regular old pencil here. And if you have that instructional sheet, you'll find that we're going to follow it pretty close. And the first thing we said to do was to draw a submarine shape. Now, let me get this and show it to you again. Actual trout are fairly long, thin fish. But when we want to make something look whimsical or cartoony, the idea is to find something that you exaggerate. You make it a little different. It's there, but you've exaggerated it. And one of the first things we're going to exaggerate on our whimsical fish is how fat he is. Isn't it funny? On our little characters, fat and fluffy's cute. Unfortunately, on us, it always doesn't seem to be that cute, does it? But for our cartoon characters, fat and fluffy is the way to go. So we're going to make this guy fat, where this guy was skinny. And that's really the only difference. We're going to draw the first shape, which was a submarine shape. Let's go back here to page 1. Our first shape we drew with this guy was a submarine shape. The first shape we're going to draw with this guy is a fat submarine shape. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to try to draw fairly hard so that you can see it. Now, again, I've said this many times in our other videos. You sketch lightly. I will draw hard just so this shows up well on the camera, because light sketching isn't going to show you how we actually do it. But the problem with what I'm doing is it's hard to erase. It won't matter too much on this scrap piece of paper I have. But if I was doing this, and I have done it on my watercolor paper, then I have lines I can't get rid of, and I have dents in my watercolor paper, which I don't like. So, do you notice? We have a fat submarine versus a skinny submarine. That's the only difference in step 1. So if you drew the trout, the realistic trout, you're not going to have any trouble at all drawing this one. This is actually easier, I think. Now, the next thing we did was do the mouth. And we're going to do that a little bit different on here. It's going to actually be easier to draw the mouth on this guy. We want to make him smiling. You notice this guy is just trundling along as happy as can be and smiling. Oh boy, does he look happy. So our realistic trout really didn't have a smile on his face. So we're going to give him exaggerated lips with a great big old smile. And actually, this is not hard to do. Come here. Give him his smile. See that smile? Now, that's not our finished smile. You see his smile right here? We're going to make it easier. Where this came to the edge, we're going to draw 2 circles. See our smile and 2 circles. Now, all we have to do is finish those old fat lips up. Is come down here, or I should say up here, and meet with the bottom of this circle. Now, we have our bottom lip in. We're going to do the same thing with our top lip. Come from this corner and just meet the circle. Now, do you see you have your nice fat lips? Now, yes, we will need to do some erasing right in here. And mine aren't going to erase well, but since you sketched lightly, you can erase yours and you'll never know you had those extra lines in there. That's going to be good enough for this, because you understand why I have some weird lines in there. There, look at those big old fat smiling lips on my fish. And weren't those easy to do? All right, next step is we did the eye. And we're going to do the eye exactly the same way, except we talked about exaggerating. We've exaggerated the body and made it fat. We've exaggerated the mouth and gave him big old fat lips. And the eye will be a little bit bigger. So, you know, I could have made this eye even bigger, and he might have been cuter with a bigger eye. You decide what size of eye you want to make. In fact, experiment a little bit. So draw a circle. Here's our pupil of the eye. Draw a circle around the outside of that one, so what we end up with is 2 circles, one inside the other. Okay, easy enough. Now, if you remembered, we talked about making a little pie shape inside the pupil. That's a highlight. It makes him look alive. Okay, next step, we need to put in his gill line. And I don't know what kind of shape to call this, and you don't have to be picky about it. Kind of like a moon that's facing that way, I guess. Or a part of a C. And you don't need to make it perfectly straight. Kind of give it some little humps and bumps a little bit there, because the gill line isn't perfectly straight. All right. See, we got our fish going already. Now we need to add the fins. Let's add the top fin up here. And all these steps are in your download, except it had you drawing your fin as a square, because the top of the real trout is fairly straight across here. But this is going to be our exaggeration again. We're going to exaggerate the curves of his fins and make them look happy and curly and just generally pretty. Now, if you remember, a trout also has this fatty fin back here, so we'll add that in there. Now, let's go to the bottom of the fish. We have the pectoral fin here, and actually an easy way to do that is to start out with a circle. Because if you go look at a real fish, they kind of have a circle joint here that makes this easy to move all directions for them, and they do move this fin all directions. Off of that, let's draw like that. Now I'll want to come in and erase that part. Let's draw this middle fin. There we go. And then we have a fin back here underneath, right by the tail. As I said, I think this is probably their rudder. It helps them swim in certain directions. I'll be honest, I'm no fish expert. I have lots of fishies, but I'm sure no expert on their anatomy. And let's add their tail. Now on the other one, we called this a heart. We came up like this and made a heart shape. Remember that? Well, we're still going to do that to a certain point, but instead of having these rounded edges, I'm going to erase those. We're going to do the finny edges like here. The flowing, pretty edge. So let's do this just like this. It doesn't matter how many of these you have in. You just do your own little edges. See how that went in there? Gave this little fish a much fancier tail than we had on our instruction sheet. Okay, now I'm going to erase this bottom of this heart that we did before, and you may not have needed to do it this time. And I want to bring the tail in a little bit fatter at the bottom than what I did. There we go. One thing about pencil and erasers, at this stage you can change anything you want and redo it. You're pretty free to do that, actually, until you get to the inking stage. We almost have it here. We want to put, now this is almost like this line. This is a long, we'll call it a worm or snaky line that goes right down the center of their sides. And in the Rainbow Trout, this is where he's pink. And that's where we will add our pink. They also have some little dots that go down their side that usually goes right down the middle of that pink spot. Now, to finish this off, I think we will go ahead and add some lines in our fins, because if you'll look at a fishy's fins, they have lots of lines like that in them. See how that went? Let's do the ones down here. Adding lines. See, we're going with the direction of the fin. Now on this fin, before I add those lines, I better erase the body line here, because the fin, being closer to me, hides the actual body back here. So I need to erase it. Now again, because you drew lighter, it will be easier for you to erase that. You want it to look like you never had a line there. Now let's go from the bottom of your little circle area like that. One more thing, we need to put some lines in our tail. I like to start towards the center of that tail. Just do like that. See how that worked? All right. Now, we need to draw in our bubbles. If you decide to use a light box, you'll have your bubbles drawn in. And good circles can be hard to draw sometimes. And so this way you'll have them all ready to go. All right, I think you have your basic fish all drawn. So at this point, you will want to transfer this to your watercolor paper, one of these that you cut in half. And I would suggest, if you're going to do a lot of art, go ahead and invest in a light box. They're only around $30 or $40 now on Amazon, and oh, so handy. If you had a light box, you would lay your watercolor paper on top of your drawing. I like to use a little bit of painter's tape and tape it down so it doesn't move on the back. Get your light box out, lay this on it, turn the light on, and you will see your outline right there. And so you can draw on your watercolor paper. Now you can either draw with your pencil, again, very lightly, and then go over it with your ink pen. Or, I'll admit, I'm lazy, don't want to do things twice. This is the stage I go ahead and ink it, because I can see it very clearly with my light box. If you don't have a light box, you could get some what we used to call carbon paper. They may have a different name for it now, but you would probably pick that up at an office store, where you lay the carbon paper down underneath this, then put it on top of your watercolor paper, and then you draw over the original, and the lines will come out on this paper. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't done that. I have a light box. You'll want to be sure that what the carbon paper lays down doesn't smudge when you add water for your watercolors. And I'm sure there's a lot of different brands of carbon paper, so you'll just have to try that out. Again, the best way is just to either draw it directly. You've practice it enough, just draw it with pencil on here and then ink it. Use a light box or use carbon paper. So, I have mine here. You find it. Already inked on a piece of watercolor paper. I didn't want you to have to watch me draw that fish again. And while I was inking it, I did go ahead and broaden the outer ring around the eye, and I colored in the dark pupil of the eye. I think that's the only different thing I did. Again, be sure you have a pen that won't smudge when you put your watercolor paints on. All right. Oh, I see, though. I missed these little dots down through here. And now there's another weird thing you're going to do. And you'll think it's crazy, and it actually won't even make any sense until you start painting. We haven't done anything about the scales. And I don't want my scales being overwhelming. I just want them to be barely there. I don't want dark lines. I want light lines, which can be a challenge with watercolor. Get your white colored pencil. Now, this is Prismacolor, and I have done it with one called Barrel somewhere. I'm pretty sure your Crayola ones will work. There might be some that don't. I haven't tried every colored pencil out there. So this is something you'll want to try, but it should work fine. And we're going to make our scales just like we did with the fish that's more realistic. But we're going to give him big scales, and we're going to do it with a white pencil. So I'm going to start right up here. And I doubt if you can even see that line. About all you can see when you do it with white is that you get a little groove in there. And I'm going to make them, probably 3/4 of an inch apart. Nice big scales. Doesn't make much sense because you can't see it. But you know what? Later on, you will see these. You'll find that lots of times with watercolor, you use some different methods to keep what's underneath white. And I'm pressing down so hard with this, it's breaking my lead, which is not real smart. But now, there was my scale lines going this way. Now, I want to make scale lines crossing over so we get this kind of design. So I'm going to start right there, and I'm just going to bring those right to the edge here so that it meets my first line there. And yes, we just crossed right over that pink area because they have scales where they're pink colored. And don't worry, these aren't all the exact same space apart. Yes, on a fish they probably are, but remember, we're drawing a cute whimsical fish there. Now, I don't know if I turn this in the light just right, whether you can see those. Probably not. Maybe a little bit there. All right. And now just put that colored pencil away. Don't worry about it anymore. Now, to get ready to paint, we need to take our painter's tape, and we're going to tape it down. This will hold it in place so it won't warp while you're painting. Now, unless you want a great big edge on here, don't put it all the way up. Put it about halfway. I have done this both ways, and you can actually paint without it. But your paper, even this good watercolor paper, tends to start to want to warp and buckle a little bit when you use a lot of water on it. And then if you've got warps and buckles, you have to deal with puddles. So, just do this step at the beginning. It doesn't take very long. And it also will give you a nice white frame when you're done. Now, we aren't going to stay with a white frame. We're going to use a washi tape frame. If you notice this cute black and white frame on here, this is just washi tape laid over this, which is really cute. Now, that's optional. And I'm sure you're wondering about this. This is sequins glued in to give him some glitter. Again, optional, but it's cute if you can do it. So, we are ready to paint, and we're going to end this video right here, we've already gone almost a half an hour, and we will paint this cute little fishy in our second part. So bye-bye for now, and we'll see you in video number 2.